Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Can you all hear me? Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا من سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأن محمدا عبده ورسوله رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم صل على محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آله وسلم تسليما أما بعد. So before I begin, I'd like to thank Darul for giving me this opportunity to present this course to you. And I'm a student at Darul completing my Alima course, and I'm very, very grateful to be completing it with this institution. So Darul provides many different courses ranging from short to long, and these courses cover many different topics for everyone. So please make sure to have a look at the Darul website for updates and further courses, and I'm sure you'll find something that will interest you from there. So let's move on to the Tafsir and the stories from Surah Kahf. Let's start with what we'll be covering today. So inshallah you'll have an idea of what to expect from today's presentation. So we'll start off with an introduction to Surah Kahf. So we'll have a brief introduction to it, and then we'll go on to the Shan-e-Nuzul of this entire surah, and then we'll go on to the major stories of this surah. Inshallah, that will cover most of our time, and then we'll end with concluding points and a summary. So let's start off with the introduction to the surah. So as you can see, the two bullet points. As you can see, can you all hear me? Can everyone hear? Okay. Okay, so let's start off with the importance of this surah. So, as we all know, the Quran is a guidance for all time, and it provides clear solutions for us when we go through difficulties, when we go through trials. You know, we can always pick up the Quran and find a solution through the trials of this dunya. And I have chosen Surah Kahf because I think it's a beautiful and amazing surah in which we can learn many stories and many morals in which inshallah we can. So does anyone know how to sort? Maybe try logging in and out. Can somebody tell her to log in and out? Okay, so okay, so let me just continue with the beginning part I was saying. So can everyone else hear me? Is it working? Can everyone hear me? Hold on, let me just. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Let me just have a look. Device. Okay, give me 1 minute. Give me 1 minute. Okay, let me just. Give me 1 minute. Sorry, sisters, 1 second. Okay, let me just. Can you hear now? Can everyone hear? Okay, not sure why this sister can't hear. I seem to... Hold on, just give me 1 minute. Sorry, give me 1 minute. Okay, let's continue for now then, inshallah. Okay. So as I was saying, sister, you just have to close your mic.
This isn't gonna work, Steve. There's good stuff here. Maybe it would have been a quick fix for something. That is so unfair.
Can everyone hear? Okay. Let's continue. Okay, sorry about that. Let's continue. Okay, so as I was saying, so we all know that the Quran is a clear guidance and it gives us clear solutions to, all the fitnas, barakallah fi, to all the fitnas and the problems of this world. So, I've chosen Surah Kahf because we can learn many lessons from it and inshallah get through these trials of this dunya through learning the stories from Surah Kahf, and there's many morals we'll be going through when we cover the stories, and inshallah we can learn something from it. So let's go on to the virtues of Surah Kahf from the ahadith. So I'll start off with a virtue from Sahih Muslim, Babu Fadli Surah Al-Kahf, which is من حفظ 10 آيات من أول سورة الكهف أسم من الدجال. So whoever memorizes the first 10 verses of Surah Kahf, he will be protected from Dajjal. So I'm sure we all know, Surah Kahf's biggest virtue is to be protected from Dajjal, and obviously we hear it a lot, but it is a very important virtue, which inshallah I'll be going into more detail about Dajjal and obviously protecting ourselves from him, inshallah. So the second virtue I'd like to mention is again from Sahih Muslim, from Babu Dhikr Dajjal. من أدركه منكم فليقرأ عليه فواتح سورة الكهف. So whoever finds Dajjal, he should recite the beginning verses of Surah Kahf. So from this short hadith, we find out that even when we find out that Dajjal is going to come out, when we find out the news that Dajjal is here and he's here, then we should pick up the Quran and inshallah begin to recite Surah Kahf, and that can also be a form of protection from him. So the third and final virtue from the hadith is from Sahih ibn Hibban, Babu Qira'at al-Quran, and Abi Kulaba قال من حفظ 10 آيات من الكهف أسم من فتنة الدجال ومن قرأ الكهف في يوم الجمعة حفظ من الجمعة إلى الجمعة وإذا أدرك الدجال لم يضره وجاء يوم القيامة ووجهه كالقمر ليلة البدر. So over here, whoever memorizes 10 verses of Surah Kahf will be protected from the trials of Dajjal, and whoever will recite Surah Kahf on the day of Jummah will be protected until the following Jummah. And if he is to meet Dajjal, Dajjal will not harm him, and on the day of Qiyamah, his face will shine like a full moon, subhanAllah. So from there, we hear another virtue of being protected from one Jummah to another Jummah, and also for your face to shine like the full moon on the day of Qiyamah. So that was just a brief introduction to Surah Kahf. Let's actually move on to the Shan and Nuzul of this surah. So as you can see in the PowerPoint, we have 2 points, the 3 questions from the Jews and why did they ask, and the importance of saying inshallah. So I'll be going through the Shan and Nuzul of the surah, and then inshallah these bullet points will make more sense to you. So the Quraysh decided to send a delegation to the Jews in Medina. In this delegation, there were 2 famous people, Nadr bin Harith and Uqba bin Abi Mu'ayt, and they were instructed by the Quraysh to go to the Jews to ask about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now you're probably wondering why would they ask the Jews about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that's because the Jews they had a knowledge of the scriptures and they could tell who was an actual true prophet. So the Jews said to the delegation, "Go back and ask your prophet 3 questions. Now he has to answer 2 of these questions and not answer the third. And through that, you'll know that he's a prophet. So if he answers all 3, he's not a prophet. And if he answers none, then he's not a prophet. So he needs to answer 2 of the 3 questions. Now, what were these 3 questions? Number 1, what happened to the young men who disappeared in ancient days? For they have a marvelous story. Number 2, ask about the mighty traveller who reached the borders of the east and the west. And number 3, ask about what is the spirit. So these were the 3 questions of the Jews, and they asked obviously to find out if Rasulullah was a true prophet. But another thing that the ulama have mentioned is that the Jewish rabbis actually asked this very cunningly to see if Prophet ﷺ had the knowledge of the Ya'juj and Ma'juj. Now you're probably wondering, Ya'juj and Ma'juj weren't mentioned in these questions, so how is that linked? But they actually are in the second question, and I'll go on to mention that later on. So upon returning to Makkah, the Quraysh approached Nabi ﷺ and they asked him the 3 questions, and Rasulullah ﷺ said, "Okay, I'll answer you tomorrow." But Rasulullah ﷺ forgot to say Insha'Allah. So the next day the Quraysh came for their answers, but unfortunately Nabi ﷺ didn't have the answers because Jibreel alayhi salam didn't come. This actually continued for a few days until it became quite an embarrassment for the Muslims and a rejoice for the Quraysh, because they thought that they succeeded in their claims, and they thought they were true in everything that they said. This continued on for 2 weeks until finally Jibreel alayhi salam came and he revealed most of Surah Kahf. So that was the Shani Nuzul of this surah and why it was revealed. And so the importance of Inshallah, as we realized from here, that when Rasulullah ﷺ forgot to say Inshallah, the revelation didn't even come. So remember, whenever you plan to do something in life, whatever you even if it's small, just remember to add on Inshallah, because it's a very important phrase that we should be saying. And I'll go into more detail again about Inshallah later on. Now, let's go on to the major stories of Surah Kahf, which should Inshallah take up most of our time. So, the major stories that we're going to be covering today from Surah Kahf is going to be, number 1, the Ashab Kahf, the people of the cave, or some people like to say the sleepers of the cave. Number 2, the people of the garden. Number 3, Musa alayhi salam and Khidr alayhi salam. And number 4, Dhul Qarnayn. So these are the 4 stories we'll be going through Inshallah, and let's begin. So let's begin with the Ashab Kahf. Now before I actually start the story of the Ashab Kahf, I want to give you some background information to the Ashab Kahf, so you've got a brief idea of when this kind of took place and all of that. So this, if you remember, was actually the first question of the Jewish rabbis, which was the young men who disappeared in ancient days, for they have a marvelous story. So most commentators say that this time relates to a time in early Christian history, at the time of the persecution of a Christian emperor called Desiccus, and that was around the 3rd century. Imam Ibn Kathir has written the story in detail, and I'm going to do a summary of that for you. And there's a lot of ikhtilaf regarding when and where this incident actually took place, so let's go through that. So most people say it took place that after Isa alayhi salam went to the heavens, which was between 100 to 300 AD, and according to another opinion, it was in 250 AD in Ephesus, Ephesus is Minor Asia in Turkey. And so according to this opinion, if they slept at 250 AD and they slept for 300 years, they would have woken up at 550 AD, and Rasulullah ﷺ was born 572 AD. So therefore, this incident only occurred 22 years before Rasulullah ﷺ's birth. But yeah, that's according to that opinion. The majority say 100 to 300. So regarding where it happened, there's a lot of ikhtilaf. Some people say Turkey, some say Sham, some say Jordan, some say Yemen. It's so much ikhtilaf, but for our understanding, Mufti Taqi Usmani's father, Mufti Shafi Rahimahullah, says with full confidence that it was in a city in Jordan. So that's a bit of background information about the Ashab al-Kahf. Now, before I actually begin the story, I'd like to just actually introduce you to Surah Kahf and give you the translation of the beginning ayahs of Surah Kahf. So we can just begin with that, inshallah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ayah number 1. All praises to Allah who has sent down upon His servant the book and has not made in it any crookedness. Ayah number 2. He has made it straight to warn of severe punishment from Him and to give glad tidings to the believers who do righteous deeds, and that for them is a good reward. Ayah number 3. In which they will remain forever. Ayah number 4. And to warn those who say, Allah has taken a son. Ayah number 5. They have no knowledge of it, and nor their fathers. Grave is the word that comes out of their mouths. They speak not except a lie. Ayah number 6. Then perhaps you will kill yourself of grief that they do not believe in this message. So let me just stop there. Let's go from ayah number 1 to 5. So ayah number 1 to 5 is the beginning of the surah, and it begins with praising Allah, which is similar to Surah Fatiha, Surah An'am, Surah Fatir, and all these surahs start off with the praise of Allah. And obviously praising Allah for the Quran He has given us over here, all praise to Allah who has sent down upon His servant the book. So we are praising Allah for the Quran He has given to us. And after this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the 4 main topics of the Quran, which are Tawheed, Risala, Akhirah, and the Quran being the ultimate truth. Now let's go on to ayah 6 to 10. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ayah number 6. Then perhaps you will kill yourself of grief that they do not believe in this message. Ayah number 7. Indeed we made that which is on the earth adornment for it, that we may test them which of them is best indeed. Ayah number 8. And indeed we will make that which is upon them barren ground. Ayah number 9. Or have you thought that the companions of the cave and the tablet were amongst our signs a wonder? Ayah number 10. When the youngsters retreated to the cave and said, Our Lord, grant us from yourself mercy and prepare for us from our matters right guidance. So that was ayah number 6 to 10, and over here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is grieved about those people in his ummah who aren't following the book, and after that Allah goes on to mention the world being an attraction and a test. Now I will go on to explaining dunya and it being a test later on, inshallah. So let's actually begin with the story of the Ashab al-Kahf. This story starts in the time of a mushrik king called Desiccus, which in Arabic is Daqiyanus. This king invited all his people to an annual festival in which they all worship the idols, and they will have enjoy their time worshipping. And there were some people who were chanting with so much passion. There were some people who were crying for the gods. There were some people sacrificing, and so many different types of people enjoying worshipping their idols. But unfortunately, there were also some people who were being forced to worship the idols because he was a tyrant king. So there was one individual, and he was standing, and he was watching all of these rituals very carefully, and a very deep thought crossed his mind. To worship a being, you'd have to give that being total submission, and you'd have to believe in your heart that that being is the creator and not created, and that being provides and doesn't receive. So these are some very deep thoughts that were crossing this individual's mind. And after thinking, he was overwhelmed with all of these thoughts and felt a strong disbelief towards idol worshipping. And he found a determination in his heart to submit to the Lord of both worlds, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he went away from the noisy crowd and he took shelter under a tree. Not too long after, he saw another youngster who was coming towards him, and that youngster also took refuge under that tree, and they both just kind of sat in silence. And then they saw a third youngster walking towards them, and he also sat underneath the tree. And that actually went on until there were 7 youngsters sitting underneath that tree. Now they were all just, sitting around and you kind of looking at each other and, curious about what the other person was thinking, or why the other person is sitting here. But obviously, none of them wanted to actually reveal their thoughts because they feared the tyrant king. So eventually, after a very long silence, one youngster stood and said, "Oh, brothers." And after saying that, he began slowly breaking the ice. He then went on to say, "We had all chosen to detach ourselves from the festival, and perhaps we should discuss our thoughts." So, hearing this, another one of the youngsters said, "I simply do not agree with the choice of religion our people have adopted, and I strongly believe that the only one worthy of worship is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who created the heavens and the earth and all that beholds it." So after these 2 youngsters had spoken out, the other youngsters kind of, they had their own thoughts voiced out aloud, and it gave them that confidence that they were all on the same platform and they all had the same mindset. So this was a new friendship based in total faith in Allah, and they decided to build a place of worship in which they could all gather and worship. But unfortunately, not long after, the tyrant king found out about this news. So the king ordered for the youngsters to have their special robes to be removed. Now, by special robes is because they belong to the ministers of the country, so they kind of had, an honor, and they would wear these special robes. So the king ordered for that to be removed, and he gave them a warning that I should withhold your punishment temporarily and allow you to think over your matter, and if you wish, you may return to the religion of your forefathers, and if not, uh, and if not, if however not, you'll be beheaded. So over here you can see that they're being, threatened with their honor and with their lives, and instead of, just easily giving up this new religion, they heard this warning and they took it as an opportunity to escape to a safer place. So they all fled to a wilderness, and as they were making their way, they met a shepherd, and this shepherd also accepted the religion of Islam. And this shepherd had a dog, and this dog's name was Kitmir. Now they were trying to, scare the dog away, and you know how when animals pass, you're like shoo, and you try to get them away. So they were trying to scare the dog away, and the dog just, despite all their efforts, continued to follow. And finally, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave this dog the ability to speak. And the dog said, "Should I not love those who love Allah?" So upon hearing this, the youngsters let the dog follow along. Now, it's a point to mention, so I'd just like to mention this, that this dog is going to be the only dog that's going to enter Jannah, and it's a point to mention that if a creature can attain such a high rank from being in the company of pious, then what can us humans attain? So, remember to always surround yourself with those who remember Allah and surround yourself with the pious, because, at the end of the day, we need to surround ourselves with those who remember Allah, because inshallah that will, you're influenced by those who you're around. So if we're influenced by those who love Allah and those who remember Allah, then inshallah that can be a means for us to attain a higher ranking in Jannah and for us to build our iman. I'll go into more detail about this later towards the end of the story. So, continuing with the story, finally the youngsters and the dog and the shepherd took shelter in the foot of a mountain, in the cave in the foot of a mountain. And this cave was very spacious inside, and it wasn't facing the north nor the west. The north nor the west? Oh, sorry, the north nor the south, and that so that the sun rays couldn't get inside the cave. So, subhanAllah, that was a miracle from Allah. So, they were just sitting and kind of worried, and they appointed one of the youngsters, go and find out what's going on. And this youngster went in disguise and he went to find out what was going on. And when he came back, he told the rest of the youngsters, "Oh, the king's soldiers and the king, they're searching for us and they're forcing our family to tell more about our whereabouts." And, the youngsters are kind of worried at this point, and they're discussing this, and as they're discussing this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put them into a long sleep of 300 years. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would occasionally turn their bodies from left to right to avoid any decomposition of their bodies. So, a lovely 300 years later, when they woke up, one youth asked, "How long have you stayed here?" And they looked outside and it was just dark. So, naturally they thought, oh, it's probably just, the night of the day we actually entered. So another youth said, maybe a day or part of a day. And then the rest of the youths said, your Lord knows best of how long you have stayed. So they felt a bit hungry at this point, and they sent one of the youngsters to go and get some food. And obviously in a sly way so that he's not caught. And the name of this youngster was Yamliha. And obviously this is a new era, it's 300 years later, and in this new era there was a large amount of people who disbelieved in the Day of Judgment, and they didn't believe in it. And the tyrant king was replaced by a new king called Beidusis. His name was Beidusis, and he was a very God-fearing king, and he was anxious for his people who didn't believe in the Day of Judgment. So this king was a believer and God-fearing and very pious. So on the day that Yamliha went to buy the food, as he was buying the food, the shopkeeper said, "Wow, it seems like you found a lost treasure." Yamliha said, "No, this is my own coin." And then the shopkeeper said, "No, this coin is 300 years old." And then Yamliha was taken to the king, who at this time was actually making dua for his people. So when Yamliha arrived, the king ordered for the tablet to be brought, and in that tablet was written the historical treasures in which all the names of the youngsters were, and all the other historical treasures that they have written. And when Yamliha confirmed his name, the king found out that indeed he is one of the youngsters who went missing 300 years ago. Yamliha went ahead and told his story to the king, and the king said, "Take me to your group. I wanna meet the rest of them." So the king, along with a large group of people, went to the cave, and Yamliha said, "Please wait here. Let me tell my people that you have come to meet them." Now, from here in the story, there's actually two narrations of what happened. The first narration is that when Yamliha went in the cave, he never came back out. So the king went to check on him, and they had all passed away. Now the second narration is that the group came out and they met the king, and they returned to the cave, and when they returned, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took away their souls. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best of which of the narrations actually happened. The king then discussed what to make next to the cave, and they decided to make a place of worship. And that was the story of the Ashab Kahf. So first thing I'd like to say is that obviously this story is clear proof of the Day of Judgment. Because if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can put these youngsters to sleep for 300 years and bring them back as if it was nothing, they just wake up and they're just a bit hungry, like obviously Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do the same on the Day of Judgment and bring all of us back to life and reassemble our bones. So let's end with what we can actually learn from this story and what we can implement to nowadays. Now, a very big point, if we can learn, is that these youngsters didn't compromise their deen for anything. So, they were threatened with execution, they were threatened with their honor, but even that didn't make them turn. They just took it as an opportunity to leave that city and go somewhere where they could actually worship Allah. And they sacrificed their lives in a sense for the sake of Allah. And these days, we need to remember to never ever compromise our deen for anything. I'm sure we easily these days put, a deen first and then dunya. Dunya first and then deen. But we need to be putting our deen first, because if we put our deen first, inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put, dunya with that. So I can give you an example of this. Like how sometimes we have really busy days and we need to go somewhere or whatever the situation, we kind of fit our salahs into, that day. We kind of just squeeze in our salahs wherever we can. We're rushing. We just quickly pray our salahs into those gaps of that busy day. Whereas that's basically us compromising our deen for the dunya, and we shouldn't be doing that. We should be basing our day around our salah. So we should see, okay, salah time is here, salah time is here. I need to pray this long, and we should base our day around that, because we shouldn't ever compromise our deen for anything. So inshallah, remember to always put your deen first and then dunya after, because with deen comes dunya. Another thing to mention is that these were youngsters, and these youngsters are an example for youngsters nowadays. Now, I'm sure as youngsters we can come across many fitnas and many trials. Obviously, being young, not being married, you're more vulnerable to a lot of sins. You're more vulnerable to many different fitnas, and if you have weak iman, then you may give into these fitnas. And we need to take these youngsters as an example to not give into fitnas, to not give into the dunya, and to keep our iman strong. And another way that they did that was surrounding themselves by those who remembered Allah. Another very important point is obviously to surround yourself by those who remember Allah, by those who they have fikr for the deen. And this inshallah will I'm sure we all know that the type of people we are near, we kind of become like them. We kind of pick up their habits and get influenced by them. So if you are to surround yourselves by those who love Allah and those who they have a fikr for the deen, then inshallah that will be in you as well. You'll learn from that. And if we seek protection from these fitnas of the dunya, then inshallah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us that protection. Now that's what we can learn from the Ashab al-Kahf. And that was a very beautiful story, as I'm sure you all hopefully found that a very beautiful story. Now let's go on to the next story. Now let's move on to the people of the garden. Now I'd like to begin with the ayahs in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the people of the garden. I actually forgot to mention the ayahs in which Allah actually begins the story of the Ashab al-Kahf. So I can just recite that to you right now. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually began the story of the Ashab al-Kahf from ayah number 13, which was, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, we relate to you their story in truth. Indeed, they were youths who believed in their Lord, and we increased them in guidance. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that all the way until ayah 26, which is, say, Allah is most knowing of how long they remained, and He has knowledge of the unseen of the heavens and the earth. How seeing is He, and how hearing. They have not besides Him any protector, and He does not have any participant in His legislation with anyone. So that was where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the Ashab al-Kahf. Let's move on to the people of the garden. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins the story of the people of the garden from ayah number 32, which is, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, and present to them an example of two men. We granted for one of them 2 gardens of grapevines, and we bordered them with palm trees, and we placed between them crops. So the Mufassirin say that this could be, it could just be an example that Allah has given us in the Quran, or it could actually be a real story. So for the Mufassirin who have said that it is a real story, there's 3 opinions regarding how this story is set out. So the first opinion is that there's 2 men who lived in Makkah. One was rich and he was a non-believer, and one was poor and he was a believer. And the second opinion is same situation as the first, but these 2 men were brothers. And the third opinion is that once again, same situation, they were brothers, they lived in Makkah, but their father left behind 4,000 dinar for each of them. So one of them bought 2 gardens, and the believer gave everything in the path of Allah. Starting with the story, so the disbelieving brother who had these gardens would give beautiful fruits, and they had rivers flowing between them and crops, and they were just very luxurious and beautiful gardens. And this rich brother would say to his other brother that I have more wealth and children than you, and he'd look at his garden with a lot of arrogance, and he'd go to his garden with arrogance, and he'd look down his believing brother. And the non-believing brother would say two very arrogant phrases, which are ayahs of the Quran. The first one, ayah number 35, I don't think this will ever be destroyed. And ayah number 36, and I don't think there is a Qiyamah, and if I am returned to my Lord, I will find better. So over here we can see, these very arrogant phrases. I don't think my gardens are ever going to be destroyed, and if I'm going to return to my Lord, I'm going to get better. That's very arrogant phrases that this brother would say. And his believing brother would say to him, you shouldn't think this way, because you're clearly denying the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created you and made you a perfect human being. And why don't you enter your garden and say, MashaAllah la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah? I'd like to mention a fun fact about that phrase, MashaAllah la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, is that was like Imam Malik's famous phrase. So he was kind of known by that phrase of saying that a lot. Like there's certain phrases, it kind of reminds you of like a certain person. So that was for Imam Malik, and he even had it written on his door. So that's just a small fun fact to mention. So continuing, the believing brother continued to say to his non-believing brother that don't think that I'm less than you in wealth and children today, because I have hope in Allah that He will give me better than your gardens. And then he went on to say, fear Allah, lest Allah sends a punishment from the skies, or He dries your rivers. And the disbelieving brother, he didn't listen, he continued to be arrogant, and unfortunately Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took away his gardens and all the rivers and left him empty-handed. And he went on to say, I wish I did not do shirk with Allah. And that's because pride and arrogance is a type of shirk. So that was a very short story of the people of the garden. It's very short, but we can learn a great lesson from this story. As you can see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can take away everything He has given. Now over here we learn to be grateful to Allah for everything He has given. Now I could talk for many hours on regarding the blessings that Allah has given. The roof over our head, the biggest blessing that Allah has given us, this central heating we have, that's a blessing. The water coming from our taps, that's a blessing. Every single thing, there's too much to count. Allah has given us so many blessings, and yet sometimes we're ungrateful, and those words of ungratefulness come out of our mouth. But we need to remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can take all these blessings away within the blink of an eye. And I'm sure, as you all know, with the coronavirus spreading, apparently shops are empty, and all the groceries are finishing. And over here, we're seeing the power of Allah, because look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us all these things every day easily, and now people are panicking to collect it, and as I'm sure you all know the situation that's going on. So remember, always be grateful for the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. Even health, being healthy and being able to hear me right now, that's a blessing, you being able to hear me. And always remembering to say Alhamdulillah for everything Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. So being able, even seeing, hearing, talking, walking, all these things are blessings, and do shukr for it, because Allah can take it away within the blink of an eye. And another point to mention from the story is looking down on people. So this arrogant brother, he would look down on his believing brother, and over here we learn that we should never look down on people who have less than us. We should be grateful that Allah has given us what we have, but we should make dua for those who have less than us, and inshallah give sadaqah and zakat and all of this, to help them. And seeing people who have less than you, it shouldn't make you more arrogant, it should humble you more, and it should make you realize the blessings Allah has given us. So kind of rambling on about that. Let's go on to the next story. So that was a very short and beautiful story. I hope we learned something from that as well. Moving on to the next story, which is the story of Musa alayhi salam and Khidr alayhi salam. Now, this story is a little bit of a long one, but inshallah we'll be able to go through it and learn something from it. So, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This story of Musa alayhi salam and Khidr alayhi salam has been mentioned in Bukhari and Muslim by Ubay bin Ka'ab that I keep forgetting to recite to the actual ayahs in which it starts. Okay, let's start that again. Musa alayhi salam and Khidr alayhi salam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the story of Musa alayhi salam and Khidr alayhi salam from ayah number 60, which is Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. When Musa alayhi salam said to his servant, I will not cease until I reach the junction of the two seas, or I continue for a long period. And that goes on all the way until ayah 83, ayah 82. As for the wall, it belonged to two orphan boys in the city, and beneath it a treasure for them. And their father was righteous, so your Lord intended that they reach puberty and extract their treasures as a mercy from your Lord. And I did not do it on my own accord, and that is the interpretation of that which you could not have patience for. So that was ayah number 60 and 82, and this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this beautiful story in Surah Kahf. So let's go on to the story. This story has been narrated in Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim by Ubay bin Ka'ab that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, once Musa alayhi salam addressed the Bani Israel, and he was just speaking to them. So he was addressing the Bani Israel and speaking to them, and from the gathering, one person stood up and said, O Musa, who is the most knowledgeable from your creation? So Musa alayhi salam said, I am, because obviously Musa alayhi salam was at the time. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to guide Musa alayhi salam that this statement was not worthy for him to say, and he should have said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best of who is most knowledgeable in his creation. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told Musa alayhi salam to go to the meeting point of the two seas. And over there you're going to find a man who's more knowledgeable than you. And Musa alayhi salam asked, how am I going to find him? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructed, put a fish in your basket and travel towards the meeting point of the two seas, and when you reach this man, the fish will disappear. And then inshallah you will meet him. So Musa alayhi salam took his companion Yusha bin Nun, and they put a fish in their basket and they set out. And during their journey, they reached a rock in which they took a rest with that rock. They laid down and rested their heads against it. And at this point, Musa alayhi salam actually fell asleep. And Yusha bin Nun was still awake. And all of a sudden, Yusha bin Nun saw the fish. It was moving a lot in the basket. And then it jumped out and it jumped into the sea, and it swam, causing a tunnel shape into the water. So Yusha bin Nun saw this, and he just kind of, he saw it and he was like, oh, he just saw it, and he actually forgot to mention it to Musa alayhi salam because Musa alayhi salam was asleep. And when Musa alayhi salam woke up, they continued their journey as normal. They walked for a day and a night, and the next morning Musa alayhi salam asked Yusha bin Nun that, go get us some breakfast because we're very tired of our journey. And over here, from the hadith, Rasulullah mentions that Musa alayhi salam was only tired after they had actually reached the point that they needed to reach. So Yusha bin Nun all of a sudden, remembered, oh yeah, that fish just kind of jumped out of the basket. And Yusha bin Nun told Musa alayhi salam the strange incident of the fish. And Musa alayhi salam was like, oh, that was the very place that we were looking for, where the fish disappeared. So they turned back and they went to the same rock, and this time they found a man lying down. This man was covered from head to toe in a sheet, and this man's name was Khidr alayhi salam. Musa alayhi salam offered the greeting of salam, and Khidr alayhi salam replied, where in the world does a salam like this come from in such a wilderness? And Musa alayhi salam replied, I am Musa. And then Khidr said, oh, you are Musa of Bani Israel. And then Musa alayhi salam said, and yes, I have come here to ask you to teach me of the special knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. Khidr alayhi salam then went on to say that you're not going to be able to be patient with me because there's a knowledge with me that you don't have, and there's also a knowledge with you that I don't have. And Musa alayhi salam replied, Insha'Allah, you will find me to be patient and I will not disobey you. Khidr alayhi salam then mentioned, okay, and you also can't question me first unless I mention it, so don't question me on anything I do. So from here the journey begins. We'll be covering 3 incidents that occur and then 3 answers, and then we'll end with a summary of the story. So the journey begins. They start walking by the shore and they come across a boat, and the people of the boat actually recognize Khidr alayhi salam and they let him on board without any charge. And as soon as Khidr alayhi salam enters, he pulls out a plank from the boat with an axe. So obviously Musa alayhi salam said, these people just gave you a free ride, and what do? You go and you tear their boat apart so that they drown? Indeed, it's a grave sin that you just committed. So Khidr alayhi salam reminded him that, didn't I tell you, you're not going to be able to be patient with me? And Musa alayhi salam immediately apologized and said that, okay, I'm sorry, can I have another chance? Now from here, Rasulullah mentions that the first time Musa alayhi salam raised an objection was actually due to forgetfulness. So that was the first incident. The second incident. Before the second incident, a bird came and sat down on the boat. This bird took a beak full of water from the sea. Khidr alayhi salam said to Musa, my knowledge and your knowledge combined is like that which is in the beak of that bird, and Allah's knowledge is like that which is in the sea, subhanallah. Like, I'm sure already we can't, our minds can't understand how knowledgeable Musa alayhi salam is, and Khidr alayhi salam being more knowledgeable than that. But comparing that to the knowledge of Allah, subhanallah, is beyond our minds, beyond the capability of our understanding to understand how much knowledge Allah has. Moving on with the story. The second incident. After leaving the boat, they started walking on the shore. And there were some boys and they were playing together and they were having fun. And Khidr alayhi salam picked one of those boys up with his own hands and killed him. So obviously, Musa alayhi salam said, you just took an innocent life unjustly. Like, once again, this is a grave sin you just committed. And Khidr reminded him, see, I told you, you're not going to be able to be patient with me. But Musa alayhi salam replied this time that, but this incident is much more severe than the first. And then Musa alayhi salam said, okay, fine. If I raise an objection again, you may remove me from your company because I have reached the limit of my excuses. So, after that, the third incident. After walking for a while, they passed a village and they requested the village. So Musa alayhi salam and Khidr alayhi salam requested the village to host them as guests and do their hospitality, but the people of the village actually refused. In this village, there was actually a wall, and that wall was about to collapse. And Khidr alayhi salam went and he straightened that wall. And again, Musa alayhi salam said, we just asked them for hospitality and we asked them to host us as guests, and they refused, and now you go and you do them a big favor. So at this point, Khidr alayhi salam said, the time has come for me and you to depart. Now, these 3 incidents, if you haven't heard the story, I'm sure you're probably confused yourself. I mean, we can't really understand why Khidr alayhi salam would do these 3 things. So Khidr alayhi salam gave his 3 answers. For the first incident, where I took the plank out of the boat, that boat belonged to some poor people, and it was mentioned that that boat was going towards the direction of a cruel king, and this king would take people's boats and he would take ownership of it. So I damaged this boat so that the king wouldn't take ownership of it and that the poor people would remain safe from any injustice. Subhanallah. Like, you think about it now, you're like, oh, that makes sense, But obviously this was the knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Khidr alayhi salam. Now for the second incident, As for the boy that I killed, that boy was going to grow up to be a non-believer and rebellious against his parents. And his parents were actually very pious, so he'd become a test for them. And it's also mentioned that this boy was replaced by a girl who grew up to be the mother of 2 prophets. And the third incident, as for the wall that I straightened, there was a treasure buried underneath it, and that treasure belonged to some orphan children, and that orphan children's father was very pious, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made arrangements to protect the treasures for those children. Subhanallah. And then Musa alayhi salam returned to his nation. Now over here, that was the story of Musa alayhi salam and Khidr alayhi salam, and we can learn a very great lesson from this is the test of knowledge. So Musa alayhi salam was tested with knowledge, and this reminds us to never ever claim total knowledge of anything. Whichever field you're studying in, an alima course if it is, or if it's an academic, or whichever field you're studying in, remember you should never claim that you have total knowledge, because the total knowledge lies in Allah. The total knowledge is only with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So never ever claim total knowledge. And another very, very important point is never ever have arrogance in your knowledge. So once again, going back to the point of arrogance, because if you have knowledge, alhamdulillah, you have knowledge, but remember that knowledge is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you could be studying endless hours, but if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't want to give you that knowledge, you're not going to get it no matter what. So the knowledge is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and don't ever let that knowledge be contaminated with pride, because obviously, knowledge that has pride, there's honestly no point of you having that knowledge, because if you gaining knowledge is, it's a way of you gaining pride, then what's the point? We should learn knowledge and inshallah be humble with that knowledge, so that Allah can increase us in knowledge. And if we are humble with the knowledge that we have, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will increase us with knowledge. And I'm sure we all know the hadith of whosoever has an atom's worth of pride in his heart will not enter Jannah. So, and I'm sure you all know that atoms are very small, you can't see atoms. So remember, no matter how much knowledge Allah does give you, say alhamdulillah once again for the knowledge, and be humble, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will increase you in that knowledge. Don't ever let pride contaminate your heart or contaminate your mind, because we all know pride and arrogance is a very deadly thing, and we can't enter Jannah with even an atom's worth of pride in our heart. So inshallah, remember to continue to seek knowledge. Yes, ask for knowledge, continue to seek knowledge, but never ever let that knowledge be contaminated with pride and arrogance. Now that was the story of Musa alayhi salam and Khidr alayhi salam. Moving on to our final story of Dhul Qarnayn. So I'll begin with where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions Dhul Qarnayn. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions Dhul Qarnayn from ayah number 83. And they ask you about Dhul Qarnayn. Say, I will recite to you about him a report. And this goes on all the way until ayah number 98. He said, this is a mercy from my Lord, but when the promise of my Lord comes, he will make it level, and the promise of my Lord is true. Now these are the ayahs, ayah number 83 to 98, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the story of Dhul Qarnayn. Now, why was he called Dhul Qarnayn? So Dhul Qarnayn means the possessor of 2 horns. Now some people say that he was called this because he ruled countries from the east to the west, and some say it's because he actually had 2 marks on his forehead that resembled horns. Now, who was Dhul Qarnayn? He was a just king who travelled the far east and the far west, and to the mountain range in the north. Mawlana Hifdhur Rahman, the author of Qasasul Quran, has mentioned that there were 4 kings who ruled the world. There was 2 non-Muslims and 2 Muslims. So the 2 non-Muslims who ruled the world, number 1, Namrud, and number 2, Bukhte Nasr, Nabukadnezar in English. And the 2 Muslims who ruled the world, number 1 was Dhul Qarnayn. And does anybody know who the other king was who ruled the world? I'm sure we've heard his story many, many times. Anybody know? A king who ruled the entire world, a Muslim king. Yes, that is correct. Sulaiman alayhi salam. So the two Muslim kings was Dhul Qarnayn and Sulaiman alayhi salam. Now, there's a difference in opinion regarding when Dhul Qarnayn was actually alive. So some say he was alive at the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam, and he also did tawaf with Ibrahim alayhi salam. And some say that he was alive at the time of Danyal alayhi salam, which was much later than Ibrahim alayhi salam. So there's ikhtilaf regarding that. We're not sure which one is true. Let's go on to the actual story. So from ayah number 86, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, until he reached the setting of the sun, he found it setting in a spring of dark mud, and he found near it a nation. And we said, O Dhul Qarnayn, either you want to punish them or take them in a way of goodness. So over here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that Dhul Qarnayn travelled towards where the sun sets. Where does the sun set? Does anybody know where the sun sets? Anybody know? Very complicated question. No one's speaking. Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me? Yeah, Dhul Qarnayn was a Muslim. He was a Muslim king. He was a very just and pious king as well. Okay, so everyone can hear. Okay, so first he travelled towards where the sun sets, which is the west. The sun sets at the west. And when he reached there, he saw the sun setting into a muddy spring. Dawood alayhi salam? Regarding Dawood alayhi salam, sorry? Slightly confused of the question. No, this is Dhul Qarnayn. So he first travelled towards where the sun sets, which is the west. And over here, he saw the sun setting in a muddy spring. So, you know, like when there's an ocean and the sun's setting, it kind of looks like the sun's setting into the ocean. So over here, there was actually a muddy spring. So it looked like the sun was setting into the muddy spring. Now over here, he found some people who are non-believers. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him the option to either punish them or to give them a chance to believe. And if they believed, they'd be rewarded, and if they didn't, they would be punished. And after this, in verse number 90, until he came to the rising of the sun, he found it rising on people whom we had not made against the sun a shield. So over here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions how he travelled towards where the sun rises. Where does the sun rise? Anybody know where the sun rises? Anybody know? Where does the sun rise? Does the sun... Well done, yes. Amazing. So the sun rises at the east. So he travelled towards the east. And over here, the people actually had nothing to save themselves from the sun. They didn't have houses, they didn't have clothes, they didn't have tents or any shelter. So... Oh, the other king was Sulaiman alayhi salam. So there was two Muslim kings who ruled the world and two non-Muslim kings. Yeah, so one was Sulaiman alayhi salam and the other was Dhul Qarnayn. So continuing with the story, these people had nothing to protect themselves from the sun, and it wasn't actually mentioned in this ayah what Dhul Qarnayn did, but most likely what he did with the people before. Now from here we're going to get into quite an interesting part of Dhul Qarnayn's story, which is including the Ya'juj and the Ma'juj. So Dhul Qarnayn travelled again towards where the range of the mountains in the north. And over here he couldn't actually understand the language of the people here, so they had a different language. But it's actually mentioned in the Quran that they were saying to Dhul Qarnayn that the Gog and Magog, they're causing a lot of corruption and a lot of trouble for us. So could you please build us a wall or a barrier between us and them so they can stop causing corruption for us? And we'll give you anything you need. And Dhul Qarnayn said, I'm not going to need your wealth. I'm just going to need some iron ingots, and mainly I'm going to need your physical help. So the people went ahead and they brought iron ingots and they began to level the iron between the two mountains, and they lit a big fire, and Dhul asked for molten copper to be poured over it. So they brought the molten copper and they poured it over the iron ingots, and the wall became very firm, and the Dhul couldn't climb through it or break it because it was very firm. So let me give you an example. Uh, when you put the iron blocks together, there's going to be like gaps between. So to kind of fill those gaps and to make it a strong wall, the molten copper was poured over it like glue. So it kind of glued everything together. Okay, now let's talk a bit about the Ya'juj and Ma'juj, as I'm sure it's quite an interesting topic. So what Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said regarding the Ya'juj and Ma'juj in the hadith is that they are from the human beings. So Ya'juj and Ma'juj, they actually are humans, and they are from the progeny of Yafith, the son of Nuh alayhi salam. The hadith also states the sequence in which everything will occur. So first will be Dajjal, then Isa alayhi salam, and then Ya'juj and Ma'juj. The Ya'juj and Ma'juj will come out when Isa alayhi salam takes a handful of the Muslims who remain into the Mount Darul. Obviously, this will be after the Dajjal has come out, and there's going to be thousands and thousands of the Ya'juj and Ma'juj, and they're going to pass by a huge river. And when the last of the Ya'juj and Ma'juj is to cross that river, there's actually going to be no water left. Subhanallah, that's how many of the Ya'juj and Ma'juj there are going to be. And at this time, there's not going to be much to eat, there's not going to be much to drink, because the Ya'juj and Ma'juj will be devouring everything on the earth. And at this time, the believers will be sustained by the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So their stomachs are going to be full by the dhikr of Allah. And that's we can just remind ourselves that we should be doing constant dhikr of Allah, because I'm sure that feeling when you're going through life, but there's an empty feeling in your heart, and you're not quite sure why there's that empty feeling in your heart. And to fill this empty feeling, you'd need to do dhikr of Allah. You need to remember Allah. You need to do more for the deen, and inshallah, Allah will fill your heart with iman and satisfy you, and fill that emptiness if you remember Allah and you do dhikr. So if you see at this time, these believers are going to be full with the dhikr of Allah. So inshallah, if we bring in the habits of doing dhikr, inshallah, we can also be full through that, and our imans can feel stronger through that. Now after this, so after the Ya'juj and Ma'juj eat everything on the earth, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will cause some worms to grow in their necks, and that will cause them to all die, and birds will come, and these birds will have long necks like camels. They will pick up the Ya'juj and Ma'juj, throw them into the oceans, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send a rain that will wash everything away, and then the earth will go on to grow all of its blessings. And this time is known as the Golden Age. So this is when Isa alayhi salam will take a handful. This is when Isa alayhi salam will live happily with the believers for 40 years, and then Qiyamah will start. So another example to give you a rough estimation of how many of the Ya'juj and Ma'juj there are is a hadith that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send 999 from every 1,000 people into Jahannam and one into Jannah. So actually thinking about this hadith, so from every 1,000 person, only one person is going to go to Jannah. And after hearing this, the Sahabas, they were really scared. They were worried, like only one of us from every 1,000. But Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said to them, don't be scared and don't be worried, because 999 from every 1,000 are going to be from the Ya'juj and Ma'juj. So wow, again, that's another example of how many there are. From every 1,000, 999 of the Ya'juj and Ma'juj into Jahannam, and one from you. So that is the story of Dhul Qarnayn. And once again, this is only a summary. There's obviously more details to the story. Now, what we can learn from the story is the test of power. Now, Dhul Qarnayn was given power, and what did he do? He didn't use it unjustly. He was very just, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him the option on what to do, but he didn't use it in the wrong way, and he was a just king. Now you're probably wondering, oh, how can I implement this, lesson in my life? I'm not gonna go and rule the world. I'm sure none of us are gonna rule the world. It's not possible. And the so how we can implement this story is, for example, in life, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you a higher status or a higher ranking. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you the chance to, for example, be a teacher or maybe a head teacher. And that's, that in a sense, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving you power, and you should never, misuse that power. You should always be just. For example, if you're a teacher, you should listen to every student. You should be just and teach, teach what you need to teach, and inshallah, not misuse the power that Allah has given you. Now, there's more examples to that, but we're just going to leave it at that for the morals we can learn from the story of Dhul Qarnayn. And let's move on to the concluding points and the summary. So that was all the stories of Surah Kahf, and I want to end with the concluding points and summary of this surah. So 3 points we can see on the screen: the beauty of the surah, the major lessons, and dunya is temporary. So I want to start with something quite interesting about Surah Kahf, is the beauty of the surah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made the surah in such a beautiful way regarding how it's written. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins and ends this surah on the same note in many different ways. So one example I can give you is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioning the importance of the Quran from ayah number 1. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. All praises to Allah who has sent down upon his servant the book and has not made any crookedness in it. So over here we see Allah has sent down upon his servant the book. And then the last ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ends with Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, ayah number 110. Say, I am only a man like you, and the revelation has been sent to me. So subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins with He who has revealed the book to his servant, and ends with the revelation has been sent to me. So that's a very beautiful, poetical thing about this surah. And it actually happens in many, many other topics. So Allah does this again with the topic of Jannah from ayah number 2, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I'm just going to start from the middle of the ayah. Glad tidings to the believers who do righteous deeds, and that for them is a good reward. And then towards the end, ayah number 107. Indeed, those believers who do righteous deeds, for them is gardens of paradise as hospitality. SubhanAllah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again began with the reward of Jannah and ended with the reward of Jannah. Again, I can give you one more example of how Allah has made this surah so beautiful. In the beginning, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam as an abd. Now, an abd meaning slave. And slave is actually the highest form of praise for a human being. So all praises to Allah who has sent down upon his abd, upon his servant. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ends with ayah number 110. Say, I am only a man like you. So over here we hear that Prophet ﷺ is a servant, but yet only a man like us. Now this is, like the spectrum of Rasulullah ﷺ, and it shows us that Rasulullah ﷺ is a human being, but he is the best of human beings, and he is the best of the creation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does this beautiful, poetical style many different ways in Surah Kahf, but I'm only going to tell you these few that there's a lot of detail regarding it, and because of lack of time, I'm only narrating to you these few. Now, let's once again recap the major lessons that we learned from this surah in case anybody fell asleep. Hopefully nobody fell asleep. Is everyone awake? Everyone awake? Hopefully no one's fallen asleep. Yeah? Okay. Alhamdulillah. Okay, let's just go over the lessons that we learned before, just to recap your memory. So, I want to start with ayah number 7, which is Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Indeed, we made that which is on the earth adornment for it, that we may test them which of them is best indeed. So over here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions out this dunya, being an adornment. And this ayah is key to understanding the entire surah, because it shows us how this life is full of tests and full of trials, and to get through them we need to strengthen our iman, we need to build our relationship with Allah. And once again we can learn these points in all four major stories. So let's recap that before we conclude. So remembering in the first story that the youngsters, they prayed for the iman and they were blessed with a miracle that was never seen before, of sleeping for 300 years. In the second story, one man, the non-believing man, he was arrogant, he rejected all the favors of Allah, and Allah punished him in this dunya, and only Allah knows what will happen in the hereafter. The third story, Musa alayhi salam humbled himself when he was told that there was a man more knowledgeable. And when he humbled himself, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him more knowledge. So subhanAllah, once again, always humble yourself, and through that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will increase you in your knowledge and increase you in your blessings. The fourth story, Dhul Qarnayn was tested with the fitna of power, but he was just and he wasn't unjust, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him the great and mighty task of blocking the Ya'juj and the Ma'juj. Another point to mention, as I said, I'm going to mention before, is the importance of insha'Allah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also gently reminds Nabi sallallahu in Surah Kahf how Musa alayhi salam said insha'Allah to Khidr, if you remember, when he said, insha'Allah, you will find me to be patient. Now, another interesting thing about insha'Allah is that the Ya'juj and Ma'juj, every single day they're going to say, oh, we're going to finish the wall tomorrow, we'll finish the wall tomorrow. But one day they'll say, insha'Allah, and that is the day that they will break down the wall and they will come out. So once again, the importance of insha'Allah. Remember, it's an easy, short phrase. Just say insha'Allah on, when you're planning on doing something, whatever it is, say insha'Allah. Now, another thing to mention is we shouldn't ever speak about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's deen without total knowledge. Yes, I am narrating to you all these stories now, but I'm telling you what I found in the Quran and in the Tafsirs. So remember, never ever talk about Allah's deen without, solid knowledge. Another point to mention is, so this is another interesting point, is that Surah Kahf teaches us the story of Musa and Khidr alayhi salam, which teaches us that we actually need a teacher and student relationship to increase our knowledge. So, there's some studies that you need a teacher to actually teach you, because if you were to self-study that, you could misunderstand a lot of things, you can misinterpret a lot of things. So, and the Quran teaches us to have a student and teacher relationship. You can find that at Darul. So, at Darul, obviously it's an institution in where you have teachers who teach you the dars and you learn. And this is the best way to learn, obviously, through someone more knowledgeable than you and who is teaching you the knowledge. And so the Quran actually teaches us that. And another thing to mention, once again, I said before, good company. Surrounding yourself with good company, those who remember Allah. Even Allah reminds Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam in ayah number 28 that you should stay with those who remember Allah. Now that's it for the major lessons we learned from the surah. I hope you can learn something from that. Let's end with, a very key point to remember is that dunya is temporary. Now I want to end with ayah number 46, and I'm ending with this ayah because I think it's a beautiful ayah to explain this last point that I have. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wealth and children are but an adornment of the worldly life, but the enduring good deeds are better to your Lord for reward and better for hope. Now, this verse, it clearly explains to us how this worldly life is just an attraction, it's just an adornment for us, and we should be preparing for the real, the eternal joy, which is the hereafter. Now, I'm sure we all know that in life we're going to go through sadness, we're going to go through happiness, we're going to have ups and downs, and so much we'll go through in life. But through all of that, we need to remember to keep our iman strong. We need to remember to build our relationship with Allah so that we can gain the eternal joy which is in the hereafter. Now, you know, we need to open our eyes to the fact that we are seeing almost all the signs of Qiyamah, and we're so close to the times, but yet we talk about it like it's so far away. But my sisters, we need to all, inshallah, open our eyes to the fact that this dunya is gonna end. When you look outside and you look at these trees and you look at the clouds, doesn't that thought ever hit you that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is gonna bring this all to an end one day? And we're just living like we're never gonna die. We're living like it's never gonna come to an end. But the truth is it will, and inshallah we can be sitting in Jannah and looking back at this time and kind of remembering this dunya, but inshallah we'll be sitting in Jannah and remembering it. So I'd like to mention another very important point of Dajjal. So obviously we know Surah Kahf is a protection from Dajjal, and Dajjal is going to be the greatest of fitnas from the time of Adam alayhi salam to the last man. And that's a big thing, Dajjal being the greatest fitnas. And once again we talk about Dajjal as though he's so far away, but we've seen most of the signs, and what's left? Dajjal is left, if you think about it, until Qiyamah, and then maybe a few other signs that I'm not quite sure of. But so if there's one thing you take away from this course, inshallah, I hope it is that you make it a habit to read Surah Kahf every Friday. Please, I really hope that you take it away from this course to, get into the habit of reading Surah Kahf every Friday, because we need to open our eyes to the fact that Dajjal could be right around the corner, honestly, and we need to strengthen our iman. We need to strengthen our iman and, work towards the goal of Jannatul Firdaus. And honestly, I'm sure we all think that, I'm not going to see Dajjal, maybe my children or maybe my children's children, but let's really think about the fact that we're almost seeing all of the signs of Qiyamah. What is left, So please start the habit of Surah Kahf. If you don't have the time to do the whole Surah Kahf, I'm sure we all know we can do the first 10 and the last 10 ayahs. Just implement this into your life, inshallah. It will be a form of protection from the biggest fitnas of all time. So remember sisters, the dunya is temporary. Put your deen first, dunya will come along. Remember, start reading Surah Kahf. I hope you learn something from these stories, and I really hope we can all take something away from this presentation. And I guess that is it. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us people of the Quran, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make the Quran an evidence for us and intercede for us on the day of judgment. That is it. Ameen. I hope you'll take something away from this. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursaleen walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Barakallah fi. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.